What if I told you one of the biggest mobile games of all time didn't just die, but was killed by its own creators? So here's the thing, Angry Birds wasn't just a game. It was the game that defined mobile gaming in the 2010s. I mean, who didn't have this app on their phone? This simple idea of slinging birds at pigs somehow turned into a multi-billion-dollar empire. But now, the birds have practically vanished. Those characters that were absolutely everywhere on your phone, on your kid's backpack. Even in movie theaters, they're barely a blip on the cultural radar anymore. So what happened? How did something this massive just collapse? Let me take you back to 2009. Smartphones are still pretty new. The App Store is this wild frontier of possibility. And then this tiny Finnish company called Rovio drops this game with these grumpy-looking birds. The gameplay was dead simple, pull back, aim, release. That's it. But man, was it addictive. The numbers are honestly mind-blowing. Within 3 years, Angry Birds hit 1 billion downloads, not millions, billions. The merchandise alone was bringing in like $200 million a year. Get this, Rovio was actually on the verge of bankruptcy before Angry Birds hit. Then suddenly they're worth over $2 billion. That's insane. These angry little birds were absolutely everywhere. Your mom knew about Angry Birds. Your grandma probably had an Angry Birds keychain. By 2012, Angry Birds wasn't just a game anymore. It was a cultural phenomenon. And Rovio was pumping out hit after hit. Remember Angry Birds Space? Angry Birds Star Wars? Each new game kept what people loved, but added just enough new stuff to keep it fresh. The merchandise was out of control. Walk into any store and you'd be bombarded with Angry Birds stuff. T-shirts, plush toys, board games, backpacks. They even built entire theme parks around these characters. In Finland, this was like their national pride. This little Finnish company was competing with Disney and winning. When the Angry Birds movie dropped in 2016, it made $352 million worldwide. That's Marvel money. It seemed like the birds were unstoppable. But here's where things get interesting beneath all this success. The cracks were already starting to show. So while everyone on the outside was seeing nothing but success, people inside the industry started noticing some red flags. Rovio went from like 50 employees to over 800 in just 3 years. That kind of growth is almost impossible to manage well. Their costs were going through the roof. But here's what really changed everything: the business model. The original Angry Birds, you paid like 99 cents once and you owned it forever. Simple. But then the mobile market started shifting toward this freemium model. Rovio followed along and started making their games free to download but packed with in-app purchases. Suddenly, those fun little puzzles started feeling more like, well, money traps with timers and currencies and paywalls. Meanwhile, games like Candy Crush and Clash of Clans were getting really sophisticated with how they kept players hooked and spending. The birds weren't just the only game in town anymore. They were starting to look kind of basic compared to what else was out there. Around 2013 to 2014, Rovio sees their growth slowing down and decides, hey, we need to be more than just a game company. Classic mistake. They launch an animation studio, a publishing division, educational products, even a venture capital fund. On paper, sure, this sounds smart. In reality, total disaster. They started pulling resources away from what actually made them successful, the games, and pouring money into all these side ventures that nobody really asked for. The animation studio made stuff that only die-hard fans cared about. The books and comics just didn't connect with audiences. And then in 2015, boom, first round of major layoffs, 213 people gone. That's when everyone realized, oh wait, this unstoppable juggernaut is actually stoppable. This wasn't just a bump in the road, this was the beginning of the end. While Rovio was busy trying to become Disney, the mobile gaming market was evolving at light speed. New genres were popping up. Battle royales, complex multiplayer games, immersive simulators, player expectations were completely changing. And Angry Birds, it started to feel kind of dated. The gameplay that felt so fresh in 2009 wasn't cutting it anymore. Plus, they had saturated the market with way too many similar games. By 2016, there were like 15 different Angry Birds titles. Even the most dedicated fans were getting burned out. Then there's the App Store algorithms. Those started favoring games with high retention and monetization, areas where the newer Angry Birds games were struggling. Without premium placement in the app stores, new titles couldn't reach that massive audience they once commanded automatically. They were just another icon, lost in an endless sea of games. 2017 should have been Rovio's victory lap. They go public with this big IPO, the culmination of their finished success story.
Why is Rovio different to these companies? How do you progress beyond the Angry Birds story?
Hello. Well, I mean, there are tons of things, of course, which makes companies successful. And if you look at Rovio, I mean, we have a very big and great portfolio of games, high-quality games. We have an extremely strong brand. The user acquisition experience and knowledge and the free-to-play experience that we have in-house is in a world-class level, as well as, of course, we have a large player base and excellent cross-promotion capabilities, all in all. So in that sense, we are in a great position with all these skills and experience and the strong brand that we have to grow further.
Instead, it was the beginning of a very public, very painful nosedive. Their stock opened at €11.50 and within 6 months had lost almost half its value. The financial reports just kept getting worse. Revenue growth not just stalling, but actually reversing. Remember that merchandise empire? Retailers started clearing Angry Birds stuff off the shelves to make room for whatever the new hot property was. The second movie made way less than the first one, the clearest signal yet that people just weren't as interested anymore. So what happens when money gets tight? Cost cutting, more layoffs, closed studios, canceled projects. This company that once had this bold, ambitious vision was now just trying to survive. Imagine being an employee who joined during the golden years and watching all this happen, just crushing. In 2021, players noticed something strange. Classic Angry Birds games were disappearing from the App Store. No announcement, no warning, they were just gone. Why? Rovio later admitted the truth. The old games were competing with their newer, microtransaction-filled versions. So they deleted them, forcing players to spend money on their pay-to-win games. The fan base revolted. Longtime players felt betrayed. Some called it corporate greed at its worst. Others said Rovio had killed the franchise for profit. As things got really dire, Rovio tried everything to recapture the magic. They remastered the classics, banking on nostalgia. Hey, remember how much fun you had with the original game? Here it is again. They tried jumping on every trend. AR versions, VR versions, even going back to the premium model with Angry Birds Reloaded on Apple Arcade. The final chapter of Rovio's independence came in April 2020, 2023, when Sega, the Sonic the Hedgehog people, bought Rovio for about $775 million.
Sega Sammy, the company best known for Sonic the Hedgehog, is gobbling up Rovio, the Finnish games company that makes Angry Birds. And really, it gets two birds with one stone. Or should that be two pigs with one bird? Firstly, and rather obviously, this deal will bring Angry Birds into the Sega family, and it's much more than a game.
Now that sounds like a lot of money, and it is. But remember when this company was valued at over $2 billion? That's a massive drop. This acquisition was both an ending and maybe a new beginning. For Rovio as an independent company, it was game over. But for the Angry Birds characters, maybe there's hope. Sega has deeper pockets and different ideas about what to do with the IP. The big question is, can these birds ever matter again? Can Sega figure out how to make Angry Birds relevant to today's gamers? Or is Angry Birds destined to be remembered as this brilliant but temporary phenomenon, something that was perfect for a specific moment in tech and culture, but couldn't survive beyond it? The Angry Birds story is fascinating because it shows how even the biggest success can unravel if you're not careful. Rovio created something truly special, a game that became part of global culture. But even monster hits can fade if you lose focus on what made them special in the first place. I think the biggest lesson here is about getting distracted. Rovio wanted so badly to be more than just the Angry Birds company that they took their eye off the ball. They wanted to be this diversified entertainment giant, but in stretching themselves so thin, they couldn't keep their core product competitive. When I look at today's mobile gaming hits like Among Us or Genshin Impact or Fortnite, I wonder if they're learning from Angry Birds' mistakes or if they're headed down the same path. In this industry, you can go from the top of the world to yesterday's news faster than you can say the birds are angry. The Angry Birds may have fallen, but what they accomplished was still remarkable. And who knows, maybe somewhere down the line, these colorful birds will find a way to soar again.